Today we're going to help you choose the perfect lens by talking about 6 things that you should strongly be considering when lens shopping. First, we're going to cover the focal length, which is probably the most important thing when choosing a lens. There's 2 types of lenses, prime lenses and zoom lenses. One is a fixed focal length, for example 24 millimeters, and what you see is what you get. You can't zoom in or out, it's just 24 millimeters. A zoom lens, however, for example a 24 to 70, is going to allow you to go from 24 millimeters to 70 and everywhere in between. They are a bit more versatile, but there are pros and cons to each. A prime lens typically has less glass and less moving parts, and therefore is a bit sharper and better performing a lot of the time. They also typically have a faster aperture, allowing for more light to be brought in, but more on that later. So you're going to have to decide which one is going to be best for you, a prime or a zoom lens. For me, just starting out, I would recommend a zoom lens so you can get in there and figure out exactly what you like to shoot. Now for photography and video, different focal lengths are going to be used to shoot different types of things. For example, a very wide 10mm lens is not going to be great for portraits, but it is going to be great for capturing a whole lot of things in the frame. A big 600mm over here is not going to be good for portraits or capturing landscapes or indoor stuff. It's going to be great for birds or when you have to get really far out there. There's also specialized lenses like macro lenses, which may or may not have a fixed working distance. It all depends on what you're looking for. Let's break it down here for you simply. An ultra-wide lens is typically from 10 to 20 millimeters, and that's going to be used to cover landscapes, real estate, and to get a ton of stuff in the frame. This is not going to be very flattering when choosing to shoot portraits, and a lot of the time with those lenses there's going to be distortion issues, so things on the outside of the frame are going to be rather distorted. Something to consider, and I wouldn't recommend an ultra-wide lens if you're just getting started out in photography. Next is our standard focal length. Let's call it from 20 to about 70 millimeters. And this range is going to be great for general purpose photography as well as video, allowing you to capture generally everything. It's not super specialized and it's going to cover a lot of bases. If you're into portraits, it's worth noting that flattering shots can be taken with the human face from about 50 to 135 millimeters. Next is going to be our telephoto range from 70 all the way up to about 200 millimeters. This is going to be great for sports, for some wildlife, and to really get out there and start capturing things that aren't right next to you. A popular and well-known lens choice in this regard is going to be the 70 to 200. And finally, we have ultra telephoto zooms from 200 all the way up to 600 and beyond. These special lenses are going to be used to shoot things like birds and wildlife, where you really need to get out there and get as much reach as possible. So I would consider which of these focal lengths is going to serve you best based off of what your needs are. Consider that there is no best lens. There's no 24 to 600 f1.8 that does everything. The more that you try and pack in a lens, there has to be sacrifices, and unfortunately, usually if you see an all-in-one zoom, it's not going to be the best performing lens. However, technology has come a long way and we are getting some phenomenal lenses. For example, this Tamron 50 to 400, allowing you to get nice and close and shoot all the way out to 400, making this one of the most versatile zooms available. For me, this thing is an absolute marvel and definitely worth considering as it doesn't sacrifice too much performance. The next thing to consider is the aperture of a lens, and I'm going to try and break it down simply here so you don't get confused. Aperture is basically how much light is allowed to get into your camera and lens, and the faster a lens is, the wider the aperture. For example, a fast f1.8 is going to let in considerably more light than an f4. A faster lens is going to have much better low light performance, as well as a direct impact on your depth of field and separation from your subject. Also, the number of aperture blades is going to impact the quality of bokeh, or your background creaminess. An image's background is going to be a lot more pleasing with a lens that has 11 aperture blades rather than 6. So ask yourself if you're going to be shooting a lot in lower light situations, and if so, you might want to consider buying a lens with a faster aperture. Unfortunately, with a faster aperture, it does come with a more expensive price tag, and it's usually considerable. Another thing to consider is fixed versus variable apertures. For example, this 24 to 70 f2.8 here has a fixed f2.8 throughout the entire zoom range, where this big telephoto has a variable aperture starting at f5 and ending at f6.3 as you zoom in. Once again, the lenses with the fixed aperture are going to tend to be a lot more expensive than the variable ones. If you plan on shooting a lot of portraits or really like the autofocus background look, I would definitely steer you toward a faster lens, like a prime lens with a fast f1.8 aperture or so. If you're planning on shooting landscapes or you want a lot of your photo in focus and aren't concerned with the background blurriness, then I would stick to a slower lens like an f4 and save a ton of money. So you can start to see that it all really depends on your needs as a photographer or video shooter. The next things to consider are the autofocus performance and the optical performance of the lens itself. Now, do you need autofocus or are you okay with a manual lens? Most lenses these days have incredible autofocus, and you're going to pay for the autofocus capabilities of a lens. You're going to save a ton of money by buying a manual lens, but they are tedious and difficult to use. For me, autofocus performance is a big consideration when choosing a lens, but most lenses these days do have great autofocus performance. Now, optically, each lens is going to be completely different. Once again, primes versus zooms. Primes are going to perform a little bit better optically. They're going to be sharper from corner to corner, where zooms might struggle a bit more from sharpness and definitely distortion and vignetting. If you're buying a lens for a specific purpose and you know that you need absolutely no distortion, that has to be a key consideration, so choosing a lens with a lot of distortion isn't going to make much sense. It's also worth noting that some types of lenses are going to be naturally sharper than others. For example, a macro lens is going to be sharper than pretty much every other lens, but that might not be a great choice for portrait photographers as they might be too sharp and need a lot of retouching in post. A lot of people want to know which is the sharpest lens, and that's definitely not the most important thing, because honestly, any lens these days can take sharp photos, and if you can't take sharp photos with any modern lens, it's really, unfortunately, not the lens's fault. So go back to the drawing board and learn your craft. I promise you, almost every lens can take phenomenally sharp photos these days. So all of these factors are going to have a big role to play in a lens's price, of course. Now, if you are on a budget and you need a specific lens, consider buying a used lens. There's a ton of resources out there to show exactly what to look for when buying a used lens, some of which I have made myself, and I'll link up there for you. Lenses can be incredibly expensive, not just to buy, but also to fix, so I'd recommend you checking out the warranty that the lens offers or buy some additional insurance. Now, one thing to consider with third-party lenses like Tamron or Sigma lenses here, they often have incredible long warranties, 6-7 years even, depending on where you're from, and that's going to cover you and give you peace of mind for a very long time, where a native Sony lens, for example, is only going to have about a year warranty. So something to consider and factor into your buying decision. Lastly, a big consideration for a lot of people is the size and weight of a lens. Before you buy the lens, ideally pick it up, put it over your neck with the strap and see how it feels, see how long it's going to take to fatigue you. Everybody's going to be different, but this little 20 to 40 is going to be a lot less fatiguing than this big 35 to 150 over here. Shooting one of these throughout the day is going to take its toll, and if you are a video shooter that might be using a gimbal or something, well, honestly, the choice is going to be pretty easy. So having taken all of these things into consideration, I really hope this video was able to help you choose a lens a little bit better, or at least give you a bit better of an understanding about what you should be looking for. Thanks so much for watching today's video, guys, and again, thanks to Tamron for sponsoring this video. If it did help you out, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, join the community, and like always, make mistakes, be yourself, and get out there and take some more pictures. See you next time.